It's spring in my Zone 5B garden, and there's really not a lot growing yet. We've gotten some greens that we've harvested, and we have a lot of things planted and a lot more to be planted in the coming weeks. But there's actually a lot of things that we can be harvesting just from our yard, things that most people would consider weeds. So I'm going to tell you about the 5 things that I can be harvesting from my spring Wisconsin yard, not even from my garden, that you can probably be harvesting too. Hi, I'm Jess from the blog siloandsage.com, and here we talk about all things homestead, homeschool, and handmade. And today we are in my yard. Well, we're actually standing in my garden, but we're not talking about things to harvest from the garden. We're talking about things that you can be foraging and harvesting from your yard or a nature trail or just a random woods somewhere that maybe most people would consider weeds that really are edible and have medicinal qualities and are basically free food and medicine. The first thing is stinging nettle. Now this stinging nettle patch grows naturally in kind of a corner of my garden, and you can actually find stinging nettle pretty much anywhere. It grows wild in a lot of places. You can find it in the woods. We find it along hiking trails all the time, but I am really fortunate that I have this patch growing here in the corner of my garden that I don't actually think anybody planted on purpose. Stinging nettle is a great plant that you can use either for medicinal purposes or you can use it just for food. Now, it's called stinging nettle and it's called that for a reason. So don't touch it with your hands without using gloves before you have dehydrated it or cooked with it. Now, you can just cook up stinging nettle, you can saute it and you can eat it. You can dehydrate it and use it as a tea. You could dehydrate it and, crumble it up and use it as like a greens powder in your smoothies or in your food. You could cook it and make it into a soup. There are so many things that you can do with stinging nettle, and it has a lot of nutritional and medicinal qualities. Make sure you identify any plants before you eat them or even use them medicinally. You can use, I will put in the description some links to some apps that I use, and you can get even like reference books so that you can check your plants before you eat them. The next plant is called dead nettle. Now, dead nettle is a little different from stinging nettle, that it's not gonna hurt you if you touch it. And it kind of has, like, the leaves have kind of a fuzzy quality to them. Do you like my garden fingers? The bees really love it. There are some bumblebees hanging out here with me right now. This actually has a lot of medicinal qualities that you could make this into a poultice to put on like wounds or scrapes. Not everybody likes to eat it because of the texture of the leaves, but you absolutely could just eat it like in a salad because it is edible, but it works great as a poultice. The next plant is garlic mustard. Now, garlic mustard, if you take it and rip a little piece off and smell it, it smells just like garlic. And it has a great garlicky flavor to it. I like to use it to make a pesto sauce, and I just use it like I would use like arugula or something if I was making a pesto. It tastes so delicious. You could saute it into just about anything. You can totally eat it raw also. I don't prefer to eat it raw. I like to eat it cooked, but there's a lot of different ways that you could prepare it. You can do pretty much whatever you want with it, but it does smell and taste a lot like garlic, so it has a really great flavor. Now, it is considered an invasive plant in a lot of places. I know it is here in Wisconsin, but I don't really have a lot of it in my yard. I just have like a couple tiny little patches of it, and I use it pretty much whatever I have. So I'm not worried about it taking over, but it does spread pretty quickly, so that is something to be aware of. You also probably have a lot of plantain in your yard. Plantain is another one of those that most people will consider a weed, but you can actually use it
it is great for wound care. So it has a lot of medicinal properties, and you can take it, you can actually, like, if you're hiking and you see plantain and you get like bug bites or a wound, like a scrape or something, you can like take a leaf and chew it and put it onto the wound, and it will help it heal.
Now, as I'm walking to show you the next plant, I see that I have violets growing, and violets, you can actually harvest the flowers and make a jelly out of them, and I actually have quite a few, so I think I might do that. Look at all these violets. Oh, they're so pretty too. Look at that. So make some good jelly. Probably the most common plant that most people consider a weed, and in fact, in like neighborhoods, people frown upon it if you have them in your yard. Dandelions. Now, we have dandelions all over our yard. We've never been the type of people to spray for dandelions. We just don't like to have chemical sprays on our lawn at all. And we would actually rather have the violets and the dandelions all over, which they are. But the dandelion has so many medicinal properties and just so much nutrition in it. And you can use most parts of the flower. You can use the tops of the flower. You can use to make jelly. Yes, another jelly. You can also infuse the flowers in oil. So you kind of take all the flowers and dry them and leave them in oil for a couple weeks, and then you can take that oil and make a dandelion salve with it. It's great for your skin, and I will leave a recipe for that, a link to a recipe in the description. You can also take the leaves of the dandelion. Let me find some leaves. You can take the leaves of the dandelion and you can actually eat them. They have a lot of nutrition in them, and you can just put them right in your salad and you can eat them. Now, some people think that dandelion leaves are a little bit bitter, and so they're maybe more of like a mustard green kind of flavor, so you may not want them in your salad. But if you're mixing them with other greens, adding a little salad dressing, you might not even notice. You can also dry the leaves and make a tea with it. You can also dig up the root of the dandelion and you can make a medicinal tea with dandelion root. Now, all of these have a lot of nutritional and medicinal benefits. A lot of people will use dandelion root in replacement of coffee even. Now, speaking of jelly, over here I have a really small redbud tree. Now, I have a really big redbud tree in the front of my yard. You can kind of see it over there. But this one, I'm just showing you this one because it's a lot closer so that you can see it a little easier. It's not really wanting to focus on it. But redbuds, you can actually use the flowers to make a jelly. There are so many flowers that you can use to make jelly. Now, as the season goes on, we're gonna find even more things that we can be harvesting and foraging from our yard. Things like, we have a whole patch of wild black raspberries that grow in our yard, echinacea and lilac. There are lots of things that are going to be growing that we'll be able to forage, and all of these things didn't cost us anything. These are things that are already growing and that grow wild and just grow naturally all over the place. Okay, the lilacs and the redbud, I guess those were planted by someone at some point. But we didn't pay for them. We didn't plant them. And a lot of these things are just naturally growing and you don't have to plant them every year. If you live in a different zone, you may find even more things that are growing in your yard. We found recently ramps that were growing, wild leeks that were growing at a local hiking spot. Now, when it comes to foraging, just make sure that you're foraging responsibly and sustainably. Now, there are some things like dandelion that are gonna grow everywhere, and there's so many of them, and you don't have to worry about getting too much much. But you don't want to be picking dandelions from your local park and harvesting them and using them because they probably have been sprayed with something. So just keep in mind when you're harvesting and foraging where you are. If you're harvesting things from a natural area or from your own yard where you know that they haven't been sprayed, that's a much better option because you can actually control and you know what is being put onto those plants. So just be aware of those things as you go on. And some things like ramps or wild leeks, they are not, you don't want to harvest the entire patch of them or they're not going to grow back. So just be aware of how you are harvesting and whether you're harvesting sustainably, what kind of things might be sprayed on those plants, that sort of thing. Now, if you liked this video and found it helpful, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and I'll see you in another video. In the meantime, keep cultivating your home.